My sister Sarah convinced my wife Jessica to leave me for her ex-boyfriend Derek, thinking I was just some middle-class accountant they could easily discard. What they didn't know was that I had been quietly building a financial empire worth 8 figures, and their greed-fueled scheme was about to backfire in ways they never imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm 36 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. My name is Michael Thompson, and I've been married to Jessica for 7 years. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, where I worked as a senior accountant at a regional firm during the day while running my private investment consultancy from our home office at night. Jessica worked as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit, and we seemed to have found that sweet spot that so many couples struggle to achieve. Our daily routine was comfortable and predictable. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., make coffee for both of us, and we'd sit on our back patio discussing our plans for the day. Jessica would leave for work around 8:30, and I'd head to my day job an hour later. Evenings were spent cooking dinner together, watching Netflix, or working on small home improvement projects. Weekends involved grocery shopping, visiting her parents, or having barbecues with our neighbor friends Tom and Amanda. What made our relationship work, I believed, was our mutual respect for each other's independence and ambitions. Jessica had her nonprofit work that she was passionate about, organizing community events and fundraising campaigns. I had my accounting career and my side business, which Jessica knew about, but never showed much interest in understanding the details. She'd occasionally ask how a particular client consultation went, but her eyes would glaze over when I started explaining investment strategies or market analysis stuff. My sister Sarah lived about 20 minutes away in a trendy downtown loft that she could barely afford on her real estate agent salary. At 32, Sarah had always been the more outgoing and social of the Thompson siblings. Where I was methodical and careful with money, Sarah was impulsive and always chasing the next big opportunity. She drove a leased BMW that stretched her budget thin and wore designer clothes that she charged to credit cards she struggled to pay off. Despite our different approaches to life, Sarah and I had maintained a close relationship. She'd come over for Sunday dinners, and Jessica seemed to enjoy having a sister-in-law who could talk about fashion, celebrity gossip, and social media trends. Sarah would often compliment Jessica on her style choices and encourage her to be more adventurous with her appearance and social life. The dynamic between the three of us had always felt balanced. Sarah would tease me about being too conservative and boring, while Jessica would laugh and agree that I could benefit from loosening up a bit. I didn't mind the gentle ribbing because I knew they cared about me, and I actually appreciated having people in my life who could help me step outside my comfort zone occasionally. What I didn't realize was how much Sarah resented what she perceived as my financial stability. While I was careful with money and lived below my means, Sarah apparently saw our modest lifestyle and assumed I was just another middle-class guy who would never amount to anything significant. She had no idea that my investment consultancy had been generating substantial returns for a select group of high-net-worth clients, or that I had been quietly building a portfolio that had grown far beyond anything my day job salary could explain. The truth was, I had been working with cryptocurrency investments, foreign exchange markets, and international real estate ventures since college. What started as a hobby trading small amounts had evolved into a sophisticated operation. I had established accounts in Switzerland, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands, not for any illegal purposes, but because my clients valued privacy and international diversification. My Swiss account alone contained more money than most people see in a lifetime. I had never told Jessica the full extent of my wealth because I wanted to be sure our relationship was built on genuine love rather than financial attraction. We had been college sweethearts who got together when I was just a broke accounting student, And I cherished the fact that she had fallen in love with me when I had nothing to offer except my personality and ambitions. Over the years, as my investments grew, I had occasionally tested Jessica's reaction to hypothetical wealth. I'd ask questions like, "What would you do if we suddenly came into a lot of money?" Or, "How would you feel about moving to a bigger house if my business really took off?" Her responses were always modest and sensible. She'd talk about maybe traveling more or donating to causes we cared about, but she never expressed materialistic desires or seemed motivated by money debt. This convinced me that Jessica was genuine in her love for me, which made me even more committed to eventually sharing my financial success with her. I had been planning to surprise her on our upcoming 8th wedding anniversary by revealing the full scope of my wealth and proposing that we quit our day jobs to travel the world together. My plan was to show her our account balances, explain how I had built the business, and let her choose how we wanted to restructure our lives. I had already started researching luxury homes in different countries and had been learning about philanthropic foundations we could establish together. The surprise was going to be the culmination of years of careful planning and the beginning of a completely new chapter in our marriage. Sarah, meanwhile, had recently reconnected with her ex-boyfriend Derek Martinez, a 34-year-old personal trainer who owned a small gym in Scottsdale. Derek was everything I wasn't: charismatic, physically imposing, and comfortable being the center of attention. He drove a lifted pickup truck, had visible tattoos, and seemed to attract attention wherever he went. Sarah had dated him on and off for 3 years before they broke up. 2 years ago, over his commitment issues, Derek's gym was struggling financially, and he had been trying various schemes to increase revenue, from selling supplements to offering expensive personal training packages. Sarah had mentioned helping him with marketing strategies and had been spending more time at his gym, supposedly working on promotional campaigns. What I didn't know was that their professional relationship had quickly rekindled their romantic connection. The problem was that Derek had always been jealous of the stability that married couples seemed to enjoy. According to Sarah, he would make comments about how boring married life looked and how lucky single people were to have their freedom. But lately, his attitude had shifted, and he had started expressing envy about the financial security that came with dual incomes and shared expenses. Sarah apparently began feeding Derek information about our marriage, describing our lifestyle and her assumptions about our financial situation. She painted a picture of Jessica being stuck with a boring husband who would never provide her with excitement or significant wealth. Derek, who was struggling with his business and living paycheck to paycheck despite his confident exterior, began to see Jessica as a potential solution to his problems. What neither Sarah nor Derek understood was that their perception of my financial situation was completely wrong. They saw our modest house, our practical cars, and our simple lifestyle, and they assumed I was just another middle-class guy who would never amount to anything significant. They had no idea that my conservative lifestyle was a choice rather than a limitation, or that I had access to resources that could change all of our lives dramatically. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would reveal not just the true nature of the people I trusted most, but also secrets that I had been carefully guarding for years. The first sign something was wrong came on a Thursday evening in late March when Jessica walked through our front door with a completely new hairstyle. She had cut off her shoulder length brown hair and dyed it platinum blonde with dramatic highlights. The transformation was so striking that I barely recognized her when she entered our kitchen. "What do you think?" she asked, running her fingers through the shorter strands with a confidence I hadn't seen from her in years. I told her it looked amazing, which was true, but I was more surprised by the sudden change than anything else. Jessica had always been somewhat conservative with her appearance, preferring classic styles that she could maintain easily. This new look was bold and required the kind of upkeep that would mean regular salon visits and expensive products. When I asked what had inspired the change, She mentioned that Sarah had taken her to an upscale salon in Scottsdale as an early birthday gift. Apparently, Sarah had been talking to her about trying something more adventurous, and the stylist had convinced Jessica that the dramatic color change would bring out her features better. Over dinner, Jessica seemed more animated than usual, talking excitedly about how many compliments she had received from her coworkers and how different she felt with the new look. She mentioned that Sarah had been encouraging her to step outside her comfort zone in other areas of her life too, suggesting new restaurants to try, different workout routines, and even changes to her wardrobe. The next weekend, Sarah invited Jessica to go shopping at some of the premium outlets in Scottsdale. They spent an entire Saturday together, and Jessica came home with several shopping bags, filled with clothes that were significantly more expensive and trendy than her usual purchases. When I asked about the cost, Jessica brushed off my concern, saying that Sarah had helped her find some incredible deals and that she deserved to treat herself occasionally. The new clothes were definitely flattering, but they represented a shift toward a more attention-grabbing style. Instead of her usual modest blouses and comfortable jeans, Jessica had bought form-fitting dresses, designer jeans, and tops that showed more skin than she typically felt comfortable displaying. She seemed excited about the changes, but I noticed she was also spending more time getting ready in the mornings and paying closer attention to her appearance throughout the day. Around this same time, Sarah started suggesting more frequent social activities that involved just the two of them. They began going to wine bars and trendy restaurants in areas of Phoenix that Jessica and I had never explored together. Sarah would post photos of their outings on social media, and I could see that Jessica was becoming more comfortable being photographed and seemed to enjoy the attention the photos received. What concerned me wasn't Jessica's desire to try new things, but rather the speed at which these changes were happening and the fact that they all seemed to originate from Sarah's suggestions. Jessica had always been independent in her decision-making, but suddenly she was deferring to Sarah's judgment about everything from her appearance to her social calendar. During one of their shopping trips, Sarah apparently introduced Jessica to Derek. According to Jessica, they had run into him at the gym where Sarah had been helping with marketing, and he had complimented Jessica's new look and suggested that she should consider joining his fitness classes. Jessica seemed flattered by his attention and mentioned that he had offered her a significant discount on personal training sessions. I didn't think much of this interaction at the time, but I noticed that Jessica started mentioning Derek's name more frequently in casual conversation. She would reference fitness advice he had given her or repeat funny stories that Sarah had told her about his gym clients. Derek was gradually becoming a more regular presence in Jessica's mental landscape, even though she was only encountering him through Sarah's stories and occasional brief meetings. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The real shift began when Jessica started expressing dissatisfaction with aspects of our life that had never seemed to bother her before. She began making comments about how predictable our routine had become and how she felt like we were living more like roommates than a married couple. These observations came up during casual conversations, but they felt pointed in a way that was uncharacteristic for Jessica. She started questioning whether we were making the most of our time together and whether our relationship had become too comfortable. Jessica would compare our weekend activities to the adventures that Sarah was having, pointing out that Sarah seemed to be experiencing more excitement and spontaneity than we were. She began suggesting that we should be more social, try new restaurants, and generally live with more energy and passion. These conversations made me uncomfortable because they felt like criticisms of choices we had made together. Our quiet lifestyle wasn't something I had imposed on Jessica. It was a mutual preference that had evolved naturally as we had settled into our careers and our marriage. We had both expressed contentment with our routine and had often talked about how much we appreciated having a peaceful home environment after dealing with workplace stress. But now, Jessica was presenting our lifestyle as a limitation rather than a choice, and she seemed to be comparing our marriage unfavorably to Sarah's single life. She would mention how much fun Sarah was having meeting new people and trying new experiences, and she wondered aloud whether we were missing out on opportunities by being so focused on our domestic routine. Around this time, Jessica also started working out more frequently, initially following online fitness videos at home, but gradually expressing interest in joining a proper gym. She mentioned that Derek had explained some workout techniques to her during their brief encounters, and she was curious about whether professional guidance might help her achieve better results than she was getting from her home routine. Jessica finally decided to join Derek's gym. She framed it as a practical decision based on the discount he had offered and the convenience of the location. She started attending group fitness classes twice a week, and she would come home energized and talkative about the workouts and the other people in the classes. Derek's name began appearing in Jessica's stories more frequently, but always in the context of professional fitness advice or amusing observations about gym culture. She would mention how encouraging he was with new clients, or how he had helped her perfect her form on certain exercises. These references seemed innocent enough, but I noticed that Derek was becoming a regular character in Jessica's daily narrative. Sarah, meanwhile, was becoming an even more influential presence in Jessica's life. They were talking or texting almost daily, and Sarah was constantly suggesting new activities or encouraging Jessica to make additional changes to her appearance or lifestyle. Sarah seemed to have appointed herself as Jessica's personal life coach, offering opinions about everything from Jessica's career goals to her choice of weekend activities. The dynamic between Jessica and Sarah was becoming more intense and exclusive. They had developed inside jokes and shared references that I wasn't part of, and Jessica would sometimes cut short our conversations to take calls from Sarah. Their relationship was evolving from casual sister-in-law interactions to something that resembled a close friendship between single women navigating their social lives together. What bothered me most was that Jessica seemed to be adopting Sarah's perspective on various topics, including her views about relationships and lifestyle choices. Sarah had always been somewhat critical of conventional marriage, often making jokes about how boring married couples became and how single life offered more freedom and excitement. Now Jessica was starting to echo these sentiments, questioning whether our stable relationship was actually limiting her personal growth. The changes weren't dramatic enough to justify a serious conversation, but they were consistent enough to create a growing sense of unease. Jessica was still affectionate and committed to our marriage, but she was also becoming someone slightly different from the person I had married. The transformation felt gradual and organic from day to day, but when I looked back over the span of several weeks, the cumulative effect was significant. I found myself wondering whether Jessica was going through some kind of delayed quarter life crisis or whether she was simply exploring aspects of herself that had been dormant during our years of domestic routine. Either way, Sarah's influence seemed to be the catalyst for these changes, and Derek was gradually becoming a more prominent figure in Jessica's expanding social world. Today marks exactly 1 year since I discovered the truth about Sarah and Derek's manipulation scheme, and my life has transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I'm writing this final update from my new penthouse apartment overlooking downtown Seattle, where I relocated after selling our Phoenix house and establishing my investment firm's West Coast operations. The divorce from Jessica was finalized 8 months ago, and it ended up being far more expensive for her than she had anticipated. While Arizona is a community property state, my attorneys were able to demonstrate that the majority of my wealth had been accumulated through premarital assets and international investments that fell outside the scope of community property. Jessica received her legal share of our joint assets, which amounted to roughly $400,000, but she had no claim to the Swiss accounts or my offshore portfolio. What Jessica didn't understand during our marriage was that my careful separation of personal and business finances had been intentional legal protection, not secrecy for secrecy's sake. Every international account had been properly declared to the IRS, and my tax attorneys had structured everything to be completely compliant while maximizing privacy and asset protection. The very discretion that Jessica and Sarah had mistaken for modest middle-class living had actually been sophisticated wealth management. The irony wasn't lost on me that Jessica's greed-motivated betrayal had cost her access to genuine wealth that she could have shared if she had simply remained loyal. Instead of becoming the wife of a multimillionaire, she was now a divorced marketing coordinator with a settlement that, while substantial by most standards, represented a fraction of what she had walked away from. Derek's situation became even more pathetic as the months passed. His gym business collapsed completely within 6 months of our confrontation. Without Sarah's financial support and marketing help, he couldn't maintain the lease payments or keep up with equipment financing. The stress of his business failure, combined with the reality that his relationship with Jessica wasn't going to solve his financial problems, led to their breakup just 4 months after Jessica moved in with him. I learned, through mutual acquaintances, that Derek had become bitter and resentful, frequently complaining to anyone who would listen about how I had ruined his life by exposing their scheme. He apparently couldn't understand that his problems stemmed from his own choices rather than my reaction to his betrayal. Last I heard, he was working as an employee at someone else's gym and struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment. Sarah's consequences were perhaps the most severe. Her real estate career never recovered from the reputation damage caused by her role in the manipulation scheme. In our interconnected Phoenix social circles, word spread quickly about her involvement in orchestrating Jessica's affair, and potential clients began avoiding her. Her income dropped dramatically, forcing her to give up the downtown loft and move back in with our parents. More significantly, Sarah lost her relationship with our entire extended family. Our parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins were horrified when they learned the full scope of her betrayal. Family gatherings became uncomfortable for everyone when Sarah was present, and eventually, she stopped attending altogether. She had traded her family relationships for a scheme that had benefited no one and hurt everyone involved. The most surprising development was learning about Jessica and Derek's subsequent relationship with each other. According to Tom and Amanda, our former neighbors who stayed in touch with both of us, Jessica and Derek's romance had been passionate but ultimately destructive. Without the external pressure of the scheme holding them together, they discovered that they had very little in common beyond physical attraction and shared resentment toward me. Derek's financial desperation had made him increasingly demanding and controlling, expecting Jessica to support him while his business failed. Jessica, meanwhile, had apparently expected Derek to provide her with the exciting lifestyle that Sarah had promised, but his actual circumstances were far less glamorous than his social media presence had suggested. Their relationship devolved into constant arguments about money, responsibilities, and unmet expectations. Jessica eventually reached out to me 6 months after our divorce was finalized, asking if we could meet for coffee to discuss our relationship. I agreed to see her, curious about what she wanted to say after everything that had happened. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Tempe that neither of us had frequented during our marriage. The woman who sat across from me was noticeably different from both the Jessica I had married and the confident woman who had left me for Derek. She looked tired and stressed, and her expensive clothes from the Sarah shopping sprees had been replaced with more practical outfits that suggested financial constraints. The platinum blonde hair had grown out and been dyed back to a color closer to her natural brown. Though the cut remained shorter than she had worn during our marriage, Jessica apologized for her role in the deception and admitted that she had made terrible decisions based on Sarah's manipulation and her own insecurities about our marriage. She explained that Sarah had convinced her that I was never going to amount to anything financially, and that staying married to me would mean a lifetime of mediocrity. Derek had represented escape from that perceived limitation, offering excitement and the promise of a more dynamic lifestyle. What Jessica found most difficult to accept was learning the truth about my financial situation. She had discovered the extent of my wealth through the divorce proceedings, and the revelation that she had left a multimillionaire for a failing gym owner was devastating to her self-image. She had traded security and genuine love for excitement and false promises, and the reality of that choice was something she was still struggling to process. I listened to Jessica's apology with a mixture of sadness and vindication. While I appreciated her willingness to acknowledge her mistakes, I felt no desire to rebuild our relationship or offer her another chance. The trust between us had been destroyed not just by her affair, but by her willingness to participate in Sarah's manipulation scheme without ever discussing her concerns with me directly. More importantly, Jessica's betrayal had revealed fundamental differences in our values that couldn't be reconciled through apologies or changed circumstances. She had chosen deception and manipulation over honest communication, and she had prioritized material excitement over the stability and love we had built together. These weren't mistakes born from temporary confusion. They were choices that reflected her core character and priorities. My new life in Seattle has exceeded every expectation I had for starting over. My investment firm has expanded significantly, taking on clients from the technology industry and benefiting from the Pacific Northwest's growing economy. The international markets I specialize in have performed exceptionally well, and my personal wealth has continued to grow at a pace that sometimes surprises even me. More importantly, I've developed a social circle of people who share my values about honesty, integrity, and genuine communication. Through professional networking and community involvement, I've met successful individuals who understand that true wealth comes not just from financial success, but from trustworthy relationships and personal character. I've also begun dating again, though I'm approaching new relationships with much more awareness of red flags and manipulation tactics. The experience with Jessica and Sarah taught me valuable lessons about the importance of observing how potential partners treat other people and handle conflict. I'm no longer willing to overlook small inconsistencies or concerning behaviors in the hope that love will overcome fundamental character differences. The most profound lesson from this entire experience has been understanding the importance of surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your success rather than resent it. Sarah's jealousy and Derek's desperation created a toxic environment that corrupted Jessica's judgment and ultimately destroyed our marriage. In my new life, I've been intentional about building relationships with people who are secure in their own accomplishments and supportive of others' achievements. Looking back, I can see that Jessica's betrayal was actually a blessing in disguise. It revealed the true nature of the people I had trusted most and freed me from relationships that were built on false foundations. While the pain of betrayal was intense at the time, it ultimately led me to a life that is more authentic, fulfilling, and aligned with my actual values and goals. Sometimes the worst betrayals become the catalyst for the best transformations. Sarah's scheme didn't just backfire. It liberated me from people who never deserved my trust in the first place. The financial aspect of my recovery has been remarkable in ways I never anticipated. Moving to Seattle opened doors to investment opportunities in emerging technologies that weren't available in Phoenix. I've partnered with several startup companies in the artificial intelligence and clean energy sectors, diversifying my portfolio beyond traditional international markets. My Swiss banker, Klaus, who I had worked with for years through remote communication, finally met me in person when he visited Seattle last month. He was impressed by how the betrayal had actually accelerated my wealth building rather than slowing it down. One unexpected development was discovering that several of my Phoenix clients had been considering leaving me because they assumed my modest lifestyle meant I lacked ambition or success. After news of my divorce and relocation spread through professional networks, these same clients reached out apologetically, asking to increase their investment allocations with my firm. They had misinterpreted my discretion as lack of success, just as Jessica and Sarah had. The irony was that my personal crisis had actually enhanced my professional reputation. My relationship with my parents took an interesting turn after they learned the full truth about Sarah's manipulation. They had always favored Sarah's outgoing personality over my reserved nature, often commenting that I was too serious and needed to be more like my sister. The revelation of Sarah's betrayal forced them to reevaluate their perceptions of both their children. They realized that my careful, methodical approach to life had been a strength rather than a limitation. While Sarah's impulsiveness had led to destructive consequences, the healing process with my parents involved several difficult conversations, where they acknowledged their role in enabling Sarah's entitled behavior over the years. They admitted they had often dismissed my concerns about Sarah's financial irresponsibility and had encouraged Jessica to be more social, partly because they thought I was holding her back. Learning that I had been quietly building substantial wealth while supporting Jessica's modest lifestyle preferences made them understand that they had fundamentally misunderstood my character and priorities. My brother David, who lives in Denver with his family, became an unexpected source of support. During the transition, he had always respected my methodical approach to life, but even he had been unaware of my financial success. When I showed him the portfolio statements and explained my investment strategies, he was amazed not just by the numbers, but by how I had managed to build such wealth while maintaining complete discretion. David became one of my first clients after establishing the Seattle office, trusting me with his retirement planning and his children's education funds. The social dynamics in Seattle have been refreshingly different from Phoenix. The technology and finance professionals I interact with here value privacy and understand that visible wealth often doesn't correlate with actual wealth. Many of my new acquaintances are also quiet millionaires who choose modest lifestyles despite having substantial resources. This environment has allowed me to be more open about my success without attracting the wrong kind of attention or creating the jealousy dynamics that had been so destructive in Phoenix. Through a professional networking group, I met Dr. Amanda Chun, a biotechnology entrepreneur who had also experienced betrayal in a previous relationship. Her ex-husband had attempted to steal her research and start a competing company, forcing her to navigate both personal heartbreak and professional sabotage. Our shared experience of rebuilding after betrayal created an immediate connection, and we've been dating for the past 4 months. Amanda understands the importance of character over appearances, and our relationship has developed based on mutual respect for each other's achievements and values. The contrast between my relationship with Amanda and my marriage to Jessica has been enlightening. Amanda celebrates my success and asks thoughtful questions about my investment strategies, genuinely interested in understanding my work rather than just benefiting from its results. When I told her about the Swiss accounts and offshore investments, her response was curiosity about the international banking systems, rather than excitement about the monetary amounts. She's building her own wealth through her biotech ventures and views our relationship as a partnership between equals rather than a dependent seeking security. Last month, I received an unexpected phone call from Jessica's mother, Margaret, who had always treated me like a son during our marriage. She called to apologize for her daughter's behavior and to express regret about how everything had unfolded. Margaret had been devastated to learn about Jessica's affair and the manipulation scheme, feeling that she had failed as a mother to instill better values in her daughter. She mentioned that Jessica had been struggling with depression and financial Stress since the divorce, working 2 part-time jobs to maintain her apartment and cover her living expenses. Margaret's call prompted me to reflect on the broader impact of the betrayal beyond just my own recovery. Jessica's choices had damaged her relationships with her parents, her co-workers who had learned about the affair, and several mutual friends who had chosen sides during the divorce. The excitement and adventure that Sarah had promised had lasted only a few months, but the consequences were permanent and far-reaching. The professional counseling I sought during the initial crisis proved valuable in ways I hadn't expected. Dr. Roberts, my therapist, helped me understand that my discretion about my wealth hadn't been secretiveness, but rather healthy boundary setting. He explained that sharing intimate financial details too early in relationships can attract people with ulterior motives, and that my gradual approach to revealing my success had been psychologically sound. The betrayal had actually validated my instincts about protecting myself and my assets. Through therapy, I also learned to recognize the warning signs of manipulation that I had missed during Sarah's campaign to influence. Jessica, Dr. Roberts, taught me about triangulation, where manipulators use third parties to create conflict and confusion, and about love bombing, where targets are overwhelmed with attention and validation to lower their defenses. Understanding these tactics has made me more confident in my ability to protect myself from future manipulation attempts. The legal proceedings revealed additional details about the conspiracy that continued to shock me months later. Sarah had apparently been documenting my daily routine and reporting back to Derek about my work schedule, when I traveled for business, and even details about our home security system. They had been planning their approach for much longer than I had initially realized, treating my marriage like a business acquisition. They were strategizing to take over. My attorney discovered that Derek had actually researched my background extensively, finding public records about my business licenses and attempting to estimate my net worth through various online databases. What he found were only the modest traces of my day job and the basic business registration for my consultancy, missing entirely the international components that represented the majority of my wealth. His fundamental misunderstanding of my financial situation had been the fatal flaw in their entire scheme. The vindication of watching their plan collapse completely has given me a sense of closure that I didn't expect to achieve. Every prediction I made about the consequences of their betrayal has come true, while their expectations have been thoroughly demolished. Derek lost his business, Sarah lost her career and family relationships, and Jessica lost both the security of our marriage and the excitement she thought she was gaining. Meanwhile, I've built a better life than I had ever imagined possible. The experience has taught me that character truly is destiny, and that people who choose manipulation and betrayal as their tools will ultimately destroy themselves through their own actions. My commitment to honesty, integrity, and careful planning has been validated in ways that go far beyond financial success. The trust I place in people now is earned through consistent behavior over time, rather than assumed based on family relationships or romantic feelings. As I look toward the future, I feel grateful for the clarity that this painful experience provided. I know exactly who I am, what I value, and what kind of people deserve access to my life and resources. The Swiss account that Sarah and Derek discovered too late represents more than just financial security. It symbolizes the rewards that come from patience, discipline, and authentic relationships built on mutual respect rather than manipulation and greed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.